Because I refused to sign over my family's century-old farm to my grandson, Ethan. He smashed my cherished photo albums and screamed that I was heartless and ungrateful. After everything we've sacrificed for you, Grandma Vivian, you're just going to hoard your land while we drown in debt? His words felt like daggers to my heart. That's when I realized the grandchildren I'd loved unconditionally had been using me all along. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from. And if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. The morning had begun so peacefully. October sunlight streamed through my kitchen windows, casting a golden glow across the worn pine table where 4 generations of our family had gathered for Sunday dinners. I hummed softly while arranging freshly cut chrysanthemums, the bronze and burgundy ones that flourished near the old oak tree, in the ceramic vase my late husband Richard had brought back from his military service overseas. I'd been looking forward to this visit from Ethan and his wife Melissa. They rarely came by unless they needed something, but I tried not to dwell on that thought. Perhaps today would be different. Perhaps today they simply wanted to spend time with their 79-year-old grandmother. I'd baked Ethan's favorite apple spice cake and prepared Melissa's preferred herbal tea, hoping these small gestures might bridge the growing distance between us. When the doorbell chimed, I smoothed my cardigan and tucked a strand of silver hair behind my ear before answering. Ethan stood on the porch, tall and handsome in his expensive golf shirt, Melissa beside him in designer sunglasses. Neither was smiling. "Grandma?" Ethan said, brushing past me with a quick peck on my cheek. His cologne was overwhelming. "Place still looks the same." I couldn't tell if that was criticism or observation. "Well, come in, I said, keeping my voice light. "I've made tea and apple spice cake." "We can't stay long," Melissa said, checking her watch before they'd even sat down. She didn't remove her sunglasses. "We have an appointment with our financial advisor at 3. My heart sank a little, but I nodded and served them anyway, my arthritis making my movements slower than I'd like. Neither offered to help. "Financial advisor?" I asked, settling carefully into my chair. "Is everything all right?" Ethan exchanged a significant look with Melissa before clearing his throat. "Actually, Grandma, that's sort of why we're here." I waited, my teacup halfway to my lips. "We've found the perfect property to develop," Melissa said, her voice suddenly animated. 30 acres just outside the city limits, prime location for a luxury housing development. Everything we've dreamed of. "That sounds lovely," I said, genuinely pleased for them. Ethan had always talked about following in his father's footsteps as a developer. "The thing is," Ethan continued, setting down his untouched cake, "we need significant capital for the initial investment." There it was. I set my teacup down carefully, the delicate porcelain clinking against the saucer. "I see. We've secured preliminary financing," Melissa added quickly. "But property values have skyrocketed, and the down payment is just—" She made a gesture toward the ceiling. "How much would you need?" I asked, though a sense of foreboding was already settling in my chest. I'd helped Ethan through college, given him money for his first car, contributed substantially to his lavish wedding. Much of that money had never been repaid despite promises. Ethan named a figure that made me blink. "That's substantial," I said carefully. "Well, we thought instead of giving us the money outright, you could sign over the farm to us," Ethan said. "It's just sitting there, 80 acres of underutilized land. We could develop part of it, use the profits for our project, and preserve the homestead for you." The farm, the land my great-grandparents had homesteaded in 1889, where my grandfather had weathered the Dust Bowl, where Richard and I had raised our children, where we'd taught Ethan and his siblings to ride horses and mend fences, where Richard had spent his final days watching the sunset over the wheat fields he loved. "The farm isn't for sale," I said quietly. "Come on, Grandma," Ethan pressed, leaning forward. You can barely manage it anymore. When was the last time you even walked the back 40? It's going to waste. I was there 3 weeks ago, I said, my voice steadier than I felt. Olivia drove me out to check the north fence line. Olivia was my youngest granddaughter, the only one who visited regularly without asking for anything. She'd drive an hour just to take me to lunch or help with household chores. Olivia? Melissa repeated with a slight eye roll. Of course. I frowned at her tone. What does that mean? Nothing, Ethan cut in. Look, Grandma, be practical. You're not getting any younger. The farm is worth a lot more now than when you and Grandpa bought out your parents. It makes sense to capitalize on it while the market's hot. Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story. The farm stays in the family, I said firmly. That was Richard's wish and mine as well. When I'm gone, it will be shared among all the grandchildren, as our will states. That could be years from now, Melissa muttered, not quite under her breath. A chill ran through me at her words. Did she resent my continued existence? Was I just an obstacle to my own property in her eyes? I'm sorry, I said, folding my hands in my lap to hide their trembling. I can't help you with this. Perhaps a smaller project for now, or different investors. A smaller project? Ethan interrupted, his voice rising. In what universe do you think Melissa and I would settle for less than we deserve? Do you have any idea how hard we work? How much pressure we're under? I understand pressure, I said softly, thinking of the years I'd managed the farm single-handedly, after Richard's heart attack. How we'd scraped by during drought years while raising 3 children. But Ethan wasn't interested in my experiences. No, you don't, he said, standing abruptly. You've had it easy. This big house paid off, the farm, your investments, and now you're just sitting on all of it while your family struggles. Ethan, I began, shocked by his characterization of my life. But he was already pacing the kitchen, agitated. It's not fair, he continued. Jessica and Tyler's kids already got help with their businesses. What about us? Don't we matter to you? My daughters Jessica and Amanda had never asked me for money for their children's ventures. I had offered small gifts when they started their modest businesses, nothing like what Ethan was demanding. That's not true, and you know it, I said, my voice hardening slightly. I've helped you all equally over the years. Equally? Ethan scoffed, his handsome face contorting. You've always favored Olivia. Everyone knows it. That's just admit it, he snapped, slamming his hand on the counter. The vase of chrysanthemums toppled, water spilling across the tile. Neither Ethan nor Melissa moved to help as I struggled to my feet to clean up the mess. As I bent painfully to retrieve the fallen flowers, I noticed my pill organizer on the bay counter. I took several medications for my heart condition and arthritis, carefully sorted each Sunday into the daily compartments. I won't sign over the farm, I said as I straightened, chrysanthemums dripping in my hand. That's final. Ethan's face darkened. In one swift movement, he grabbed my leather-bound photo albums from the sideboard, the ones containing 6 decades of family history, and hurled them across the kitchen. The binding of one broke on impact, sending irreplaceable photos scattering across the floor like fallen leaves. Ethan! I gasped, shocked by the violence of the gesture. After everything we've sacrificed for you, Grandma, he shouted, his voice unfamiliar with rage. You're just going to hoard your land while we struggle? I stared at my grandson, suddenly seeing not the boy I'd loved but a stranger consumed by entitlement and greed. A cold clarity washed over me as I looked at my scattered family photos, some crushed under Melissa's expensive heel as she stood by silently, making no move to intervene. I think you should leave, I said quietly. Melissa finally spoke. Let's go, Ethan, She's obviously not going to be reasonable. As they stormed out, neither looked back at the mess they'd left, physical and emotional. The front door slammed with such force that the antique barometer Richard had cherished fell from the wall, its glass face shattering against the hardwood floor. In the sudden silence, I carefully lowered myself to my knees and began gathering the scattered photographs, tears blurring my vision. Some of these images were the only ones I had of Richard's parents, of our early years on the farm, of the children when they were small. That's when I knew. The grandchildren I'd helped raise, whom I'd loved unconditionally, had been using me all along. And somewhere along the way, my love had become nothing more than a resource to be exploited, my very existence an inconvenience to their financial ambitions. As I picked up a cracked frame containing a family photo from Ethan's high school graduation, all of us smiling proudly, something hardened in my heart. A resolution taking shape through the hurt and betrayal. If my grandchildren only valued me for my money and property, then perhaps it was time they learned exactly what that meant. That night, I couldn't sleep. I kept replaying Ethan's outburst, the scattered photos, Melissa's cold indifference. My hands trembled as I sipped chamomile tea in my darkened kitchen, moonlight casting long shadows across the floor I'd scrubbed clean of the earlier confrontation. The phone rang at 10:30 p.m., startling me from my thoughts. It was my daughter, Jessica. "Mom, Ethan just called me," she began without preamble. "He's very upset." I gripped the phone tighter. "Is that so?" "He says you refused to help them with their development project. That you were—" She hesitated. "Difficult." "Difficult?" I repeated, the word bitter on my tongue. "Is that what he calls it when he throws an elderly woman's family photos across the room?" Silence on the other end. Then, "I'm sure he didn't mean to—" "He meant exactly what he did, Jessica," I interrupted, my voice steadier than I felt. "Your son came here demanding I sign over the family farm so he could develop it. When I refused, he had a tantrum that could have seriously harmed me." "The farm?" Jessica sounded genuinely surprised. "But that's been in the family for generations. That's where Dad spent his—" "Yes," I said quietly. "Where your father spent his last summer, where your children learned to ride." Apparently that means nothing compared to Ethan and Melissa's desire for a luxury housing development. Jessica sighed heavily. "Mom, I'm sorry. I'll talk to him, but you know how they've struggled to save—" "Struggled?" The word broke something loose inside me. "Last month, Melissa posted photos of their trip to Bali. Ethan drives a car that cost more than your father and I paid for, our first 50 acres. They eat at restaurants where the entree costs what I spend on groceries for a week. What exactly about their lifestyle suggests struggle to you?" "It's complicated, Mom. The economy is different now. Property values have—" "Do not lecture me about economics, Jessica Marie," I said, using her middle name as I had when she was a child in trouble. "I lived through recession and drought and farm crises. Your father and I saved for 20 years to expand the farm. We drove used tractors and mended our own clothes and worked from sunrise to sunset. We didn't demand that someone else hand over their property because we wanted more than we could afford." Another sigh. "Look, can we talk about this tomorrow when everyone's calmer?" "Has he called to apologize?" I asked. Silence. "That's what I thought," I continued. "Jessica, I need you to understand something. I love my grandchildren. I always have. But I will not be treated this way. Not by Ethan. Not by anyone." "Of course not, Mom. No one should be treated disrespectfully. But families have disagreements. We can work through this." I closed my eyes, suddenly feeling every one of my 79 years. There's a difference between a disagreement and what happened today. Your son showed me exactly who he is and what he thinks of me. And frankly, it's made me reconsider a great many things. What does that mean? Jessica's voice sharpened with alarm. It means I have some thinking to do, I said. Good night, Jessica. I hung up before she could respond, something I'd never done before. My hand shook as I set the phone down. I wasn't accustomed to standing my ground with my children. Richard had always been the firm one, the boundary setter. I had been the peacemaker, the one who smoothed things over. But Richard wasn't here anymore. It was just me now. Me and the land that had sustained our family for 4 generations. Land that Ethan saw not as a legacy, but as a development opportunity. The next morning, Jessica arrived unannounced. Her expression was a careful blend of concern and appeasement. She brought fresh scones and my favorite blackberry preserves, as though breakfast offerings could erase what had transpired. Mom, she began, setting coffee before me. I spoke with Ethan. He admits he lost his temper, but he was just disappointed. You know how much that development project means to them. And you know how much the farm meant to your father, I replied, leaving the coffee untouched. To all of us once. Jessica had the grace to look uncomfortable. Of course it's special. No one's denying that. But practically speaking, you could get a very good price for it right now. The farm isn't for sale. I repeated the same words. I'd said to Ethan, not to strangers and not to family. Jessica studied me for a moment. This isn't like you, Mom. You've always been so generous, so willing to help. And how has that generosity been repaid? I asked quietly. When was the last time Ethan visited without asking for something? When did Melissa last call just to check on me? Even you, Jessica. Would you be sitting here now if Ethan hadn't called you complaining last night? A flush crept up her neck. That's not fair. We're all busy. The kids have their lives. I have the gallery. We can't be here every day. I'm not asking for every day, I said. I'm asking for basic respect, for being treated as a person, not a bank. No one thinks of you as a bank, Jessica protested, but her eyes slid away from mine. 2 months ago, I fell in the garden and couldn't get up for nearly an hour. It was Olivia who found me. Olivia, who stops by every week without fail, who calls just to chat, who remembers my birthday without a reminder from you. Where was Ethan then? Or Amanda's daughter Zoe, who only calls when she needs money for those ridiculous business ventures of hers? Mom, that's last Christmas, I continued, unable to stop now that the dam had broken. I sat alone in this house while you all celebrated at Amanda's. It's too difficult to move all the presents, you said. Next year we'll do it at your place. It was the same excuse as the year before. Jessica looked stricken. We invited you. You could have come. I have arthritis, Jessica. I can't drive at night anymore. And none of you offered to pick me up. Olivia was visiting her father's family in Colorado. So I spent Christmas alone, looking at photos of all of you opening the gifts I'd carefully chosen and wrapped myself. Tears filled my eyes, but I blinked them back. I wouldn't cry. Not now. I didn't know, Jessica whispered. You didn't ask, I replied. None of you ever ask. You just assume I'm fine until you need something from me. Jessica reached for my hand, but I gently pulled away. I've made a decision, I said. I'm calling my lawyer today. I'm changing my will. Jessica's face went pale. Mom, don't be hasty. If this is about Ethan, we can... This is about all of you, I said, my voice quiet but firm. This is about years of being taken for granted, of being valued only for what I can give, not for who I am. That's not true, Jessica insisted, but there was panic in her eyes now. We love you. Perhaps you do, I acknowledged, in your way, but love without respect, without reciprocity, that's not enough anymore. Jessica left shortly after, her scones untouched, promising to talk to Ethan and Amanda about making more of an effort. I didn't believe her, not anymore. After she left, I called Martin, my lawyer of 30 years, and scheduled an appointment for the following day. Then I picked up the phone again and dialed Olivia. "Grandma." Her warm voice immediately soothed something raw inside me. "I was just thinking about you. How are you?" For the first time in days, I smiled. "I'm finding my strength, dear, and I could use your help with something important." When Olivia arrived the next morning, I was already waiting on the porch, my mother's cameo brooch pinned to my sweater, and my old leather handbag packed with the necessary documents. Her face broke into a wide smile as she bounded up the steps, planting a kiss on my cheek that wasn't hurried or obligatory, but genuine. "You look nice, Grandma," she said, helping me to my feet. "Big plans today?" "We're going to see Martin," I told her, accepting her steadying arm. "My lawyer." Olivia's eyebrows rose slightly, but she asked no questions as she helped me to her car, adjusted my seat for comfort, and made sure my seatbelt was secure before closing the door. These small courtesies, once common, now seemed remarkable by their rarity. As we drove, I gazed out at the countryside that had been my home for nearly 6 decades. Past the elementary school where I'd taught for 30 years before retiring to help Richard run the farm full-time. Past the church where we'd renewed our vows on our 40th anniversary. Past fields where our family had planted and harvested, through good years and bad. "How are things at the Wildlife Center?" I asked Olivia, who worked as a rehabilitation specialist for injured raptors. She lit up immediately, telling me about a bald eagle she was nursing back to health, about the educational programs she ran for local schools, about her hopes for expanding the center's work. Unlike my other grandchildren, Olivia never complained about money. She lived simply in a small cabin on the edge of the wildlife preserve, drove a modest used truck, and seemed genuinely content. "What about you, Grandma?" she asked as we neared Martin's office. "Jessica called me last night. She seemed upset." I looked at my youngest granddaughter's profile, so like her grandfather's. The same determined chin, the same kind eyes. "Did she tell you what happened with Ethan?" Olivia's hands tightened slightly on the steering wheel. "Some of it. She said he lost his temper at your house, that there was a disagreement about the farm." "He destroyed my photo albums," I said quietly. "The ones with all the family history. Because I wouldn't sign over the farm so he could develop it." Olivia's face darkened in a way I'd never seen before. "He did what?" She pulled the car over suddenly, turning to face me fully. "Are you all right? Did you get all your photos? Do you need help putting them back together?" Her immediate concern for the family memories, rather than for Ethan's disappointment or the property's value, struck me profoundly. This, I realized, was what love actually looked like. "I'm fine," I assured her, patting her hand. I gathered everything up. But it was illuminating. "Illuminating?" Olivia repeated, her voice tight. "Grandma, that's not just inappropriate, it's destructive. He could have—" "I know," I interrupted gently. "And that's why we're going to see Martin today." Olivia fell silent, understanding dawning in her eyes. Without another word, she pulled back onto the road. Martin Jacobson had been our family lawyer since before Olivia was born. His office was unchanged since Richard's days. The same worn leather chairs, the same oak desk, even the same ancient fern in the corner that somehow never died. The only concession to modernity was the sleek computer where once a typewriter had sat. "Vivian," Martin greeted me warmly, rising from behind his desk. He was in his 60s now, his hair more salt than pepper, but his handshake was still firm, his blue eyes sharp behind wire-rimmed glasses. "And young Olivia, good to see you both." Once we were settled with cups of tea, Martin remembering without asking that I preferred mine with lemon, no sugar, I explained my purpose. "I want to change my will, Martin," I said directly, significantly. If Martin was surprised, he didn't show it. He simply nodded and retrieved my file from a drawer. I have your current will here, the one you and Richard drafted after he became ill. Primary residence, farm, investments, and personal effects divided equally among your children, with the stipulation that the farm not be sold for at least 10 years after your passing. Yes, I nodded. That's the one we need to change. Olivia sat quietly beside me, her expression supportive but neutral. She hadn't asked why I'd brought her, hadn't questioned my intentions. Her trust in me was complete. What changes did you have in mind? Martin asked, pen poised over a legal pad. I took a deep breath. What I was about to do went against everything Richard and I had planned, everything we had believed in about treating our children equally, about family harmony. But circumstances had changed. I had changed. I want to establish a trust, I began, my voice stronger than I expected. The primary residence and farm will go into it, along with all investments and insurance proceeds. Martin nodded, writing. And the beneficiaries of this trust? That's where things get complicated, I said. I want conditions. Martin's eyebrows rose slightly. What sort of conditions? The money and property will be distributed based on time spent with me in my remaining years, I said firmly. Documented time, visits, phone calls, assistance when needed, not just on holidays or when they want something. Olivia shifted uncomfortably beside me. Grandma, are you sure? I'm quite sure, I interrupted gently. Martin, is this possible? The lawyer tapped his pen thoughtfully against his pad. Unusual, but not unprecedented. We could structure it as a points-based system. Visits earn points, regular phone calls, helping with medical appointments or household needs. We'd need an impartial executor to track and verify. I'd like you to be the executor, Martin. You've known our family for years. You'll be fair. Martin looked thoughtful. And the farm? That was always Richard's special concern. At the mention of the farm, a memory surfaced with sudden clarity. Richard sitting on the porch swing at sunset, Olivia beside him, both of them watching a family of deer emerge from the woodlot at the edge of our property. Richard's voice, weakened, by illness but still firm. Remember, Songbird, some things are worth more than money. This land, these moments, this is the real inheritance. The farm goes to Olivia, I said, the decision crystallizing as I spoke it. Immediately, not after my passing, with the provision that I may use it as I wish for as long as I live, and that family members can still visit there with her permission. Olivia's head snapped up. Grandma, no, I can't accept that. What about the others? It should be shared, like you and Grandpa wanted. I turned to face my granddaughter, seeing in her all the values Richard and I had tried to instill in our family: generosity, fairness, compassion. Olivia, who drove me to check the north fence line last month, just because I mentioned wondering how the new plantings were doing. She looked down at her hands. I did. And who helped repair the barn roof last summer? Who checks the irrigation system every spring to make sure it's working properly? I do, but your grandfather and I bought that land to be used, to be loved, to be a gathering place for family. The others see it as an asset to be liquidated. You see it as we did, as a home. What about Ethan and the others? Olivia asked quietly. This will devastate them. Perhaps, I acknowledged. Or perhaps it will awaken them to what truly matters. I turned back to Martin. There's one more thing. I want a letter included with the will. Something they'll all read after I'm gone. Martin nodded. We can arrange that. And as we worked through the details, something shifted inside me. A weight lifting, a clarity emerging. For years I had measured my worth as a mother and grandmother by what I gave, materially and emotionally. I had confused generosity with self-sacrifice, had allowed myself to become a resource rather than a person. No more. On the drive home, Olivia was unusually quiet. Finally, she spoke. "Grandma, are you doing this to punish them? Because of what Ethan did?" I considered her question carefully. "No, not to punish. To teach, perhaps, or simply to acknowledge reality. People reveal themselves through their actions, Olivia. I've been refusing to see what's right in front of me for too long." "They'll be angry," she warned. "There will be drama." "Yes," I agreed, looking out at the autumn landscape, leaves just beginning to turn crimson and gold. "But I've discovered something important, Olivia. At 79, I have less time. Ahead of me than behind. I don't wish to spend it being taken for granted or treated with disrespect." Olivia reached over and squeezed my hand. "For what it's worth, I think Grandpa would be proud of you right now." Tears pricked at my eyes, but they weren't entirely sad ones. "Thank you, dear. I think perhaps he would." When we arrived home, there was a sleek black SUV in the driveway that I recognized immediately. Amanda. My middle child, always the most volatile of my children, was waiting on my front porch. "Ready for this?" Olivia asked, concern evident in her voice. I straightened my cameo brooch and lifted my chin. "Quite ready. The time for pleasant fictions is over. Now we deal in truths." Amanda was pacing on my front porch, her designer, heels clicking in impatient rhythm. When she saw Olivia helping me from the car, her expression shifted from irritation to a manufactured smile. "Mom, there you are. I've been waiting for almost an hour." Her eyes flickered to Olivia, a momentary calculation visible in them. "Olivia, what a surprise to see you." "Hello, Aunt Amanda," Olivia replied politely, but I felt her hand tighten slightly on my elbow. "What brings you by, Amanda?" I asked as Olivia unlocked the front door. "I wasn't expecting you." "Well, I thought we should talk," she said, following us inside. Her gaze swept critically over the living room, the worn furniture Richard and I had chosen together decades ago, the faded curtains, the shelves of books and family photos. I'd never cared much for redecorating after Richard passed. What was the point? "Olivia, would you mind making some tea?" I asked, settling into Richard's old armchair. "Actually, Mom," Amanda interjected quickly, "I was hoping we could speak privately." She gave Olivia a pointed look. Olivia glanced at me, questioning. I nodded slightly. "It's all right. Go ahead and start the kettle." Once Olivia had disappeared, into the kitchen, Amanda leaned forward, her voice dropping conspiratorially. "Mom, what's this I hear about you changing your will?" So that was it. News traveled fast in our family, at least when money was involved. "Jessica called you, I presume?" "Of course she called me. She's worried sick. We all are." Amanda's perfectly manicured hand reached for mine. "Mom, making decisions when you're upset is never a good idea. Whatever happened with Ethan, and I'm sure he was partly at fault, it's not worth disrupting. Our entire family over." I gently withdrew my hand from hers. "And who told you what happened with Ethan? Did you speak to him directly?" Amanda waved dismissively. "Melissa filled me in. She said there was a misunderstanding about the farm, that you overreacted when Ethan expressed interest in it." "Interest?" I repeated the word hollowly. "Is that what they're calling it? Did she mention that this interest included demanding I sign it over so they could develop it? Or that when I refused, Ethan destroyed family photo albums that can never be replaced?" Amanda's eyes widened briefly before her expression smoothed. "I'm sure it wasn't quite that dramatic, Mom. You know how Ethan can be passionate when he's disappointed. And really, the farm. When was the last time you even walked the property line? It's just sitting empty most of the year." "I was there 3 weeks ago," I said, echoing what I'd told Ethan, "with Olivia." "Well, that's nice," Amanda said, in a tone that suggested it was anything but. "But be practical, Mom. You're not getting any younger. Maintaining a historic property at your age isn't sensible, and Ethan and Melissa could really use the help getting started. That development would be very profitable. I'm aware of my age, thank you, I said quietly. And yes, I've been to see my lawyer today. My will is being revised. Amanda's face tightened. Mom, please tell me you're not doing something rash. Dad always insisted everything be split equally. It's what's fair. Fair? I echoed, the word bitter on my tongue. Tell me, Amanda, when was the last time Zoe visited me? Not called asking for money for another of her schemes, but actually visited. Amanda straightened, defensive. Zoe is extremely busy with her entrepreneurial ventures. You know that. She's networking, building her brand. It's a different world now, Mom. Young people have to hustle constantly just to stay afloat. Is that what we're calling it? Because from where I sit, hustling looks remarkably like posting yacht photos from the Hamptons, while simultaneously texting me that she can't make rent and needs another $3,000. That's not fair. Building a business requires investment in relationships, in presenting the right image. Amanda, I interrupted, suddenly weary of the pretense. Your daughter has started and abandoned 5 businesses in 3 years. She's not an entrepreneur. She's a dilettante playing with my retirement money. Amanda stood abruptly, color rising in her cheeks. I can't believe you'd say that about your own granddaughter after everything we've done for you. Those words. Again, the same ones Ethan had hurled at me. And what exactly have you done for me, Amanda? Please enlighten me. We've included you in our lives. We call. We visit. When? I challenged. When do you visit except when you need? Something? When do you call except to tell me why Zoe needs more money? Or why you can't pick me up for a doctor's appointment? Or why this year's Thanksgiving will again be at your house, where I'll sit alone in a corner while everyone exchanges gifts? I wrapped and paid for? Amanda stared at me as if I'd suddenly started speaking a foreign language. Mom, are you feeling all right? You don't sound like yourself. Actually, I'm feeling more like myself than I have in years, I said, a strange calm settling over me. I've been a convenience to this family for too long. A source of childcare, money, emotional support, giving and giving while receiving very little in return. That's what mothers do, Amanda shot back. That's what grandmothers do. They give. They don't keep score. There's a difference between giving freely and being taken advantage of, I said quietly. And yes, my will is changing to reflect that difference. Olivia appeared in the doorway, a tray of tea things in her hands. The look she gave me was full of quiet pride. Amanda glanced between us, her eyes narrowing. So that's it, she said coldly. Olivia's turned you against us. Olivia has done nothing of the sort, I replied. She has simply been present, been thoughtful, been the kind of granddaughter Richard and I hope to raise. And what does that make my children, or Jessica's? Amanda demanded, voice rising. What? Because they have their own lives, their own struggles, they're somehow lesser? I sighed deeply. No one is lesser, Amanda. Everyone has simply made their choices. And now I'm making mine. And what exactly are these choices? She pressed. What are you planning to do with your property? With Dad's money? That's between me and my lawyer, I said simply. But I will tell you this. From now on, my relationship with my grandchildren will be based on genuine connection, not financial expectation. Amanda snatched up her purse, hands shaking. You'll regret this, Mom. When you're sick or lonely or need help, you'll regret alienating your family. I already am sick and lonely and in need of help, I replied calmly. The cow. Only difference is that now I'm acknowledging it instead of pretending all is well for everyone else's comfort. After Amanda stormed out, slamming the door hard enough to rattle the windows, Olivia and I sat in silence, sipping our tea. The confrontation had left me drained but oddly peaceful, as if a long festering wound had finally been lanced. "Are you okay, Grandma?" Olivia asked finally. I considered her question carefully. "I believe I am. It's strange. I've spent years afraid of upsetting anyone, of being seen as difficult or demanding. But now that I've started standing up for myself, I find I'm not nearly as fragile as I feared." Olivia smiled. "You've always been the strongest person I know. You just didn't know it." That night, alone in the bedroom I'd shared with Richard, for nearly 5 decades I pulled out the old photo albums that Ethan had damaged. I'd gathered the scattered photos, but many frames were broken, pages torn. There we were on our wedding day, so young and hopeful. There were Jessica, Amanda, and their brother David as children, laughing on the old tire swing Richard had hung from the oak tree. There were the grandchildren as babies, as toddlers, as teenagers. Ethan with his first car that we'd helped pay for, Zoe at her high school graduation in the dress I'd sewn, and Olivia helping Richard mend fences at the farm. In the quiet darkness, I allowed myself to weep, not just for what had been lost, but for what had never truly existed except in my desperate desire to believe in the family I thought we were. "Oh, Richard," I whispered to the empty room. "I've been such a fool. I've given and given, thinking it would make them love me more, when all it did was teach them to value me less." The only answer was the soft ticking of the bedside clock and the gentle whir of the ceiling fan. But somehow I felt Richard would have understood. He'd always seen our children more clearly than I had always been the one to set boundaries when I couldn't bear to. "I'm doing it now, my love," I told his memory. Better late than never, I suppose. Morning light filtered through the lace curtains Richard had never wanted to replace, casting delicate patterns across my bedroom wall. I'd slept surprisingly well despite the confrontations of the previous day. There was a certain liberation in speaking truths long kept silent. Over breakfast, simple toast and coffee that I ate alone at the kitchen table, I made a decision. I needed to see the patterns clearly, to understand fully how my relationships with my children and grandchildren had evolved over time. No more rose-colored memories or convenient excuses. I retrieved a blank notebook from the desk in the study and began to write. Dates, events, interactions as objectively as I could recall them. When each grandchild had last visited without wanting something. When my children had called just to check on me. How birthdays and holidays had been celebrated in recent years. Who had helped when I'd fallen ill with pneumonia last winter. The picture that emerged was starker than even I had imagined. In the past 2 years, Olivia had visited 42 times, often driving an hour just to have lunch with me or help with household tasks. She called at least twice a week, remembered every birthday and anniversary, and had spent 3 nights sleeping in a chair beside my hospital bed during my pneumonia. Ethan had visited 9 times, each visit coinciding with a request for money or assistance. The pattern was remarkably consistent. First, the warm greeting and surface-level catch-up. Then the careful inquiry about my finances, followed by the eventual request, typically framed as a short-term need that was, in reality, neither short-term nor genuine need. Zoe's pattern was even more transparent. She never visited at all, preferring to call when she needed money for her latest venture. These calls followed a script so predictable I could almost recite it with her. The effusive greeting, the cursory, "How are you, Grandma?" Never waiting for a real answer, the breathless excitement about her newest opportunity, and finally, the carefully calculated request for exactly the amount she thought I would give without too much resistance. My children's behaviors showed their own patterns. Jessica, always the diplomat, maintained surface-level pleasantries while subtly facilitating her children's requests. Amanda was more direct, viewing my resources as essentially family property to which all had some entitled claim. My son David, who had moved to Seattle years ago, maintained minimal contact, a Christmas card, an occasional call on my birthday. He rarely asked for anything, but he rarely offered anything either. As I filled page after page, a cold clarity settled over me. This wasn't about one incident with Ethan, or even the cumulative effect of many small disappointments. This was a fundamental misalignment of values, a family that had come to view me primarily as a resource rather than a person deserving of care and respect. The telephone rang, interrupting my thoughts. It was Jessica. "Mom," she began without preamble, "Amanda called me last night. She was very upset." "I imagine she was," I replied calmly, closing my notebook. "She says you're planning to disinherit the children except for Olivia, that you're giving her the farm." I sighed. "That's not entirely accurate, but yes, I am. Revising my will. The farm is going to Olivia. That part is true." Jessica's intake of breath was audible. "Mom, you can't do that. It's not fair to the others. We always agreed everything would be split equally." Life isn't always equal, Jessica. Neither are relationships or the effort people put into them. So this is some kind of what? Punishment? A way to make us prove our love? "No," I said, firmly. "It's a recognition of reality. Olivia has been present in my life in ways the others haven't. She's shown care and concern without expectation of reward. The farm means something to her beyond its monetary value." "And it doesn't to the rest of us?" Jessica challenged. "When was the last time you visited the farm, Jessica?" I asked. "When was the last time Ethan went there except to assess how much it might sell for?" Silence on the other end. "I thought so," I continued. "Olivia goes regularly. She maintains it, enjoys it, values it for what it is, not what it's worth." "Mom, please." Jessica's voice took on a pleading tone. "This will tear the family apart. Ethan and Zoe will never forgive you, or Olivia. Perhaps they should be asking themselves why Olivia is receiving the farm, rather than blaming her or me for the decision. It's not that simple, and you know it," Jessica said, frustration evident. "Family dynamics are complicated. Everyone shows love differently. Just because Olivia has more free time to visit—" "Stop," I interrupted, suddenly weary of the excuses. "This isn't about free time, Jessica. This is about choices. We all have the same 24 hours in a day. We all decide how to allocate our attention, our care, our presence. Your children have consistently chosen to give me their attention only when they want something in return. That's not a time management issue. It's a values issue." "You're being unfair," Jessica insisted. But her voice lacked conviction. "Am I? Let me ask you something, Jessica. Do you know what medication I take for my heart condition? Do you know who my doctor is? When my next appointment is?" Silence. "Olivia knows," I said quietly. "She has it all written down. She drives me to every appointment because I can't see well enough to drive myself anymore. Something I've mentioned to you several times, though you always seem to forget when I need a ride somewhere." "Mom, last month," I continued, the words flowing freely now, "I mentioned to Zoe that my washing machine was broken. Do you know what she said? She said, 'That's too bad, Grandma. Hey, I need $800 for a social media marketing course.' She didn't even suggest calling a repairman. Olivia drove over that weekend and fixed it herself." "We can't all be Olivia," Jessica said defensively. "No, but you could all show basic concern for my well-being," I replied. "You could all remember that I'm a person, not just a convenient source of childcare and financial support." Jessica was quiet for a moment. When she spoke again, her voice was tight with restrained emotion. "What do you want from us, Mom? Just tell us what you want." The plaintiveness of her question caught me off guard. What did I want? The answer came with surprising clarity. "I want to be valued for who I am, not what I can provide," I said simply. "I want visits that aren't preludes to requests. I want conversations where someone asks how I'm doing and actually listens to the answer. I want to be treated with the same consideration and respect that you'd give to a friend. And if we do all that, you'll change your will back? Jessica asked immediately, confirming my point. That's exactly what I'm talking about, Jessica, I said, disappointment heavy in my voice. You're still seeing this as a transaction. Be nice to Mom, get her money. That's not a relationship, it's a business arrangement. That's not what I meant, she backpedaled quickly. I just want to understand what you're asking for. I'm not asking for anything, I clarified. I'm stating what I need to feel respected and loved. What you and the others do with that information is entirely up to you. But yes, my estate will be distributed based on the relationships I have with each of you in my remaining years. That decision is made. After we hung up, I returned to my notebook, adding Jessica's call to the pattern I'd been documenting. The response was so predictable, so aligned with everything that had come before, that it only confirmed my decision. Later that afternoon, I called Olivia. Would you be free this weekend to take me to the farm? There are some things there I'd like to go through. Of course, Grandma, she replied without hesitation. I'll pick you up Saturday morning. Should we stay overnight? Yes, I think that would be nice. The autumn colors should be beautiful this time of year. They are, she said, and I could hear the smile in her voice. The maples along the creek are just turning scarlet. That she knew this, that she had noticed. It was such a small thing, yet it spoke volumes. As I packed a small bag for the weekend, I thought about the patterns I documented, about the relationships that had slowly eroded through years of imbalance and presumption. There was sadness in this recognition, certainly, but also a strange sense of peace. Seeing clearly, even when the view is painful, is preferable to comfortable illusion. Richard had always said, "The truth may hurt, but lies infect." After years of infection, of telling myself that my children and grandchildren were just busy, that they still cared deeply, that the lack of reciprocity in our relationships was normal, the truth, however painful, felt like the beginning of healing. The farm looked exactly as it had when Richard and I had moved there after buying it from my parents. A white 2-story farmhouse with green shutters and a wide wraparound porch, a red barn weathered by decades of sun and snow, fields stretching toward distant woods now painted in autumn's fiery palette. It wasn't grand or ostentatious, but its simple beauty and the history embedded in every acre were precisely what we'd loved about it. Olivia carried my bag inside, opening windows to release the slight mustiness that had accumulated since our last visit. Would you like some tea, Grandma? I brought that ginger blend you like. That would be lovely, I said, settling into the old rocking chair on the porch. From here, I could see the back fields where Richard had taught each grandchild to ride horseback, the apple orchard where they'd climbed trees and picked fruit for pies, the creek where they'd caught crawdads on summer afternoons. So many memories layered over this land. I closed my eyes, feeling the gentle October breeze on my face, listening to the familiar rustle of corn stalks ready for harvest, the distant lowing of the neighbor's cattle. Olivia brought my tea and sat in the adjacent rocker, content to share. The silence. That was another thing I'd always appreciated about her. She didn't feel the need to fill every moment with chatter. I've been thinking about what to do with some of the family heirlooms, I said finally. Your grandfather's tools, my mother's quilts, the china your great-grandmother brought from Scotland. Olivia nodded. Important decisions. No rush, though. Right? No rush, I agreed. But I'd like to be intentional about it. Things should go to those who will value them not just as possessions, but for what they represent. We spent the morning going through the farmhouse, making notes about certain items. The antique roll-top desk Richard had loved, the collection of first-edition farming manuals I'd acquired over decades, the hand-carved walking sticks made by a local craftsman who'd since passed away. Around noon, Olivia was checking the furnace in the small utility room when her phone rang. She glanced at it, then back at me with an odd expression. "It's Ethan," she said. "Should I answer?" I hesitated, then nodded. "Go ahead." Olivia put the call on speaker and set the phone on the counter between us. "Hey, Ethan. What's up?" "Olivia, man, where are you? I stopped by Grandma's place, but nobody's home." "We're at the farm," Olivia replied, catching my eye. "Just doing some maintenance." "The farm?" Ethan's tone shifted slightly. "That's perfect, actually. Melissa and I were thinking of driving out there tomorrow, to apologize to Grandma in person for that misunderstanding the other day." I raised my eyebrows at the word misunderstanding. Olivia's expression mirrored my skepticism. "I'm not sure that's a good idea, Ethan," Olivia said carefully. "Grandma's pretty tired, and we're planning to head back early tomorrow." No, it's important," Ethan insisted. "Family needs to stick together. Plus, I want to show Melissa the property. She's never been— Can you believe it? After all these years?" I could believe it all too easily. Melissa had always made it clear that rural settings weren't to her taste. "Let me talk to Grandma about it," Olivia hedged. "I'll call you back." After ending the call, Olivia looked at me questioningly. "What do you think? Do you want to see them?" I considered the question carefully. I think we both know why they suddenly want to visit, and it's not to offer a genuine apology. Olivia nodded, understanding. "They heard about the will changes. They want to assess the property value." "Most likely," I agreed. "But perhaps we should let them come. It might be educational." Olivia looked uncertain. "Are you sure, Grandma? I don't want you upset again." "I'm sure," I said, feeling strangely calm. "Some confrontations are necessary." Olivia called Ethan back and arranged for them to visit the following morning. We spent the rest of the day peacefully walking along the creek, collecting brilliant autumn leaves, preparing a simple dinner, sitting on the porch watching the sunset paint the fields in golden light. I slept soundly in the room Richard and I had shared for so many years, lulled by the familiar sounds of wind rustling through cornfields and an owl's distant call across the meadow. Morning brought clear skies and the sharp scent of fall in the air. Olivia made breakfast, her grandfather's recipe for buttermilk pancakes with maple syrup we'd tapped from our own trees last spring. It was a quiet, pleasant meal until the bye. Sound of tires on gravel announced our visitors. Ethan's luxury SUV pulled up beside Olivia's practical pickup, looking as out of place as a peacock in a henhouse. Ethan emerged first, dressed as if for a country club in pressed khakis and a cashmere sweater, followed by Melissa in what appeared to be brand-new designer outdoor wear, complete with impractical leather boots that had clearly never seen dirt. "Grandma," Ethan called with exaggerated warmth, bounding up the porch steps to kiss my cheek. "You're looking well. The country air agrees with you." "Hello, Ethan," I replied evenly. "Melissa." Melissa offered a stiff smile, her eyes already scanning. The property assessingly. "This is quaint." "Isn't it great?" Ethan enthused, his performance almost painful to watch. "I have so many memories here. Remember when Grandpa taught me to ride on Old Pepper? Remember the bonfires and hay rides?" I did remember teaching Ethan to ride, since Richard had been ill by the time Ethan was old enough. And the last time Ethan had visited years ago, he'd spent the entire weekend on his phone, complaining about the poor reception. "Come inside," Olivia offered, a slight edge to her usual warmth. "I've made coffee." Once we were settled in the farmhouse's small living room, an awkward silence fell. Melissa perched on the edge of the sofa as if afraid it might dirty her expensive clothing, while Ethan's eyes darted around, likely mentally cataloging what could be sold. "So," Ethan finally began, clapping his hands together, "I wanted to apologize properly for my behavior the other day. I was out of line, totally out of line. It's just been a stressful time with the development plans and work pressures, but that's no excuse for taking it out on you." The apology sounded rehearsed, empty of genuine remorse. I simply nodded, waiting, and he continued when I didn't respond. I've been thinking a lot about this place, about how special it is to our family, the history here, the connection to Grandpa. Have you? I asked mildly. Absolutely, he insisted, warming to his script. That's why I wanted Melissa, to see it, to understand why it means so much to all of us. It's certainly rustic, Melissa offered, brushing invisible dust from her sleeve. Very natural. That was always the appeal, I said. Your grandfather didn't want anything fancy, just a working farm where the family could gather away from distractions. Exactly, Ethan exclaimed, as if I'd made his point for him. And that's why I've been reconsidering my position. The farm should stay in the family. Absolutely, 100%. I'm glad to hear you've had a change of heart, I said, though we all knew what had prompted it. So much history here, Ethan continued, gesturing expansively. And actually, Melissa and I were thinking, if you wanted to transfer the property now, we could take over the maintenance, the property taxes, all that burden. You wouldn't have to worry about any of it. And there it was, the real purpose of this visit, the true motivation behind the sudden appreciation for family history. That's very thoughtful, I said, keeping my voice neutral. But I've already made arrangements for the farm. Ethan's smile faltered slightly. What kind of arrangements? I've decided to transfer ownership to Olivia, I said simply. Effective immediately. The silence that followed was thick enough to cut with a knife. Melissa's eyes widened while Ethan's face went through a rapid succession of expressions. Shock, confusion, anger. To Olivia? He finally managed, his voice strangled. But that's not fair. This is a family property. It should be shared. That's what Grandpa would have wanted. Your grandfather wanted the farm to be used and loved, I corrected gently. Not sold to fund luxury developments. Ethan's facade cracked. This is about the other day, isn't it? One mistake and you're punishing me, giving everything to the golden child here. He jabbed a finger toward Olivia, who remained calm, though I could see the tension in her posture. This isn't about punishment, Ethan, I said. It's about recognizing who values this place for what it is, not what it's worth. That's bull! Ethan caught himself, forcing a laugh that sounded more like a snarl. Come on, Grandma. We all know what's going on here. Olivia's been working you, playing the devoted granddaughter while the rest of us have actual lives and responsibilities. Is that what you think caring for your grandmother is? Being worked? I asked quietly. You know what I mean, Ethan said dismissively. Olivia's always been good at playing the long game. Olivia started to respond, but I held up a hand. Olivia doesn't need to defend herself. Her actions speak for her, just as yours do for you. Ethan's face darkened. So that's it? You've made up your mind based on what? Who visits most often? Who calls the most? Not everyone can drop everything to drive out here every weekend. This isn't about frequency of visits, I said, keeping my voice steady despite the anger building inside me. This is about intention, about respect, about seeing me as a person, not an asset to be managed or exploited. Exploited? Ethan practically spat the word. Is that what you think we're doing after everything we've done for you? There. It was again. That phrase that seemed to be the family refrain. Everything we've done for you. As if I were a burden they'd nobly shouldered, rather than a person who had given them everything. What exactly have you done for me, Ethan? I asked, my voice quiet but firm. Please enlighten me. When I fell and couldn't get up, where were you? When I needed rides to doctor's appointments, where were you? When I spent Christmas alone because no one would drive me to Amanda's, where were you? Melissa shifted uncomfortably, suddenly very interested in her manicure. That's not fair, Ethan protested. We have jobs, responsibilities. So does Olivia, I interrupted. Yet somehow she manages to check on me regularly, to help with house repairs, to simply call and ask how I'm doing without wanting something. In return. This is ridiculous, Ethan said, standing abruptly. Olivia's been poisoning your mind against us. This isn't like you, Grandma. On the contrary, I replied, this is exactly like me. The real me. Not the doormat you and the others have come to expect. The woman who raised your mother to be strong and independent, who taught school for 30 years, who nursed your grandfather through a long illness without complaint. That woman has been too quiet for too long, but she's speaking now. Ethan turned to Olivia, who had remained silent throughout the exchange. You think you're so clever, don't you? Playing the devoted granddaughter while undermining the rest of us. What's your end game here? Get the farm, then what? The main house too? All of Grandma's investments? Olivia met her cousin's gaze steadily. I don't have an end game, Ethan. I just care about Grandma. Right, Ethan sneered. Saint Olivia, so selfless, so perfect. Tell me, does Grandma know about the trouble at the Wildlife Center? About your funding falling through? Pretty convenient? Timing to suddenly become her favorite. I saw a flash of hurt cross Olivia's face before she composed herself. Grandma knows everything about my situation. I've never hidden anything from her. And for the record, I told her not to give me the farm. I argued against it. Oh, I'm sure you did? Melissa spoke up suddenly, her voice dripping with sarcasm. Such a transparent play. Pretend to refuse so you look noble, all while knowing she'll insist. We're not idiots. That's enough, I said sharply, my patience finally reaching its limit. I won't sit here and listen to you attack Olivia for having the basic decency to treat me with respect. The decision about the farm is made. The paperwork is being processed. It's done. You can't do this, Ethan insisted, his voice rising. It's not just yours to give away. Grandpa would never have approved. Don't you dare invoke your grandfather's wishes, I said, standing to face him despite my arthritic knees protesting. The sudden movement. Richard saw through you long before I did. That boy, he used to say, values things over people. He worried about the kind of man you were becoming. Turns out he was right to worry. Ethan's face flushed red. So now, I'm a disappointment too. Perfect. Anything else you want to get off your chest while you're rewriting family history? Yes, actually, I said, feeling a lifetime of suppressed truths rising to the surface. I am disappointed, Ethan. Not in your career or your achievements, but in your character. In the person you've chosen to become. Someone who destroys family heirlooms when he doesn't get what he wants. Someone who visits his grandmother only when he needs money. Someone who sees his grandfather's beloved farm as nothing more than a commodity to be liquidated for his own benefit. This is insane, Ethan muttered, running a hand through his hair. You've completely lost touch with reality. No, I said firmly. For the first time in years, I'm seeing reality exactly as it is. And it's painful, but necessary. Melissa stood, placing a restraining hand on Ethan's arm. Let's go, she said tightly. This is getting us nowhere. You're making a huge mistake, Grandma, Ethan said, his voice now cold. You'll regret this. When you need help, when you're sick or can't manage alone, don't come crawling to us. The threat, for that's what it was, hung in the air between us. I met his gaze steadily. I would never crawl to anyone, Ethan, especially not to someone who has made it abundantly clear that their assistance comes with conditions and expectations of repayment. Fine, he snapped. Give everything to Olivia. See if she takes care of you when the money's gone. Let's go, Melissa. As they stormed toward the door, Ethan paused, turning back with a final parting shot. You know what? You deserve to end up alone. You and your precious Olivia can have your little farm. The rest of us are done." The door slammed behind them with such force that one of Richard's old fishing lures fell from its hook on the wall, landing with a small clatter on the wooden floor. The silence that followed was profound. Olivia moved to pick up the lure, carefully returning it to its place. "I'm sorry, Grandma," she said quietly. "I didn't mean to come between you and the family." "You didn't," I assured her, easing back into my chair, suddenly exhausted. "They did that themselves long ago. I just didn't want to see it." I looked around the small farmhouse that had housed so many memories. Children laughing, meals shared, quiet evenings by the fire. For years, I'd clutched desperately to an image of family harmony that had existed more in my hopes than in reality. The pain of letting go was acute, but there was also a strange relief in finally acknowledging the truth. "Do you regret it?" Olivia asked hesitantly. "Telling them about the farm? Standing up to Ethan?" I considered her question carefully, watching through the window as Ethan's SUV kicked up dust in its hasty departure. "No," I said finally. "I regret that it came to this. I regret not setting boundaries years ago, when the patterns first began to establish themselves. But I don't regret speaking my truth today. Some things need to be said, even if they're painful to hear." Olivia nodded, understanding. "What happens now?" "Now," I said, reaching for my teacup which had gone cold during the confrontation. "We continue as we were. I imagine there will be fallout. Angry calls from Jessica and Amanda, perhaps even attempts to contest the will changes when the time comes, but I'm prepared for that." "And the rest of the family? Ethan, Zoe, the others?" I sighed, feeling the weight of the morning's events settling on my shoulders. They have choices to make. They can reflect on what's happened, on their own behavior, and perhaps make changes. Or they can continue as they have been, seeing me only as a source of financial support, rather than a person worthy of respect and care. Either way, I'll be fine. "You will," Olivia agreed, reaching over to squeeze my hand. "You're stronger than all of us put together." Later that afternoon, as predicted, my phone began to ring incessantly. Jessica, then Amanda, then even my son David calling from Seattle, each demanding explanations, each expressing shock and outrage at what they'd heard from Ethan. I let the calls go to voicemail. Tomorrow would be soon enough to deal with their reactions. Today, I wanted peace. Olivia and I took the old tractor out to check the fence line, driving slowly along the perimeter of the property. The maples along the creek blazed crimson and gold in the afternoon sun, and somewhere in the distance a flock of geese called as they began their journey south. "Your grandfather loved days like this," I told Olivia, breathing in the crisp autumn air. "He said you could feel the rhythm of the seasons on days when summer and fall dance together." Olivia nodded, her eyes on the distant tree line. "I remember. He taught me to listen for what he called the spaces between seasons. Said that's where the most beautiful changes happen." That evening, as fireflies began to appear along the edge of the cornfield, I took out a pen and paper and began to write the letter that would accompany my will, the words my family would read after I was gone. No more protecting them from uncomfortable truths, no more sacrificing my dignity to preserve a false peace. "The truth may hurt," Richard had always said, "but lies infect." It was time to heal the infection, even if the cure was painful. The week following the confrontation at the farm unfolded exactly as I'd anticipated. My phone rang constantly with calls from Jessica, Amanda, and various grandchildren. I let most go to voicemail, listening to their increasingly indignant messages, with a calm detachment that surprised even me. "Mom, you need to call me back. This has gone far enough," Jessica's voice demanded from my answering machine. "The family is in chaos. Ethan is beside himself. We need to talk about this rationally. Amanda was less diplomatic. I can't believe you'd do this to your own family. Picking favorites, creating divisions. This isn't you, Mom. This is Olivia's influence. Call me back immediately. Even Zoe, who rarely contacted me except for financial requests, left a message. Grandma, it's Zoe. I'm really hurt that you'd give the farm to Olivia without even talking to the rest of us. I have so many memories there. Remember when I was 8 and you taught me to make strawberry jam? I was planning to bring my future children there someday. I had indeed taught Zoe to make strawberry jam, a memory she'd apparently excavated for this strategic moment. What she didn't mention was that she hadn't visited the farm since that summer, having declared it boring and full of bugs upon reaching adolescence. Olivia, true to her nature, offered to mediate. I could talk to them, Grandma. Explain. That this was your decision, not mine. No, I said firmly. They'll only see that as confirmation that you're manipulating me. This isn't your burden to bear. On the 5th day of this communication siege, I finally answered a call from Jessica. Mom, thank God, she breathed when she heard my voice. We've been so worried. There's no need for worry, I replied calmly. I'm perfectly fine. We need to talk about this farm situation, she pressed. The family is falling apart. Ethan won't speak to Olivia. Amanda is talking about legal action. Even David is upset, and you know how uninvolved he usually is. I'm sorry they're upset, I said, but my decision stands. Mom, please. Jessica's voice took on the placating tone she'd used since childhood when trying to manage a difficult situation. Can we at least meet and discuss this like adults, all of us together? Maybe we can find a compromise that everyone can live with. I considered refusing. After all, I'd made my position clear. But perhaps there was value in one final family conversation, one last opportunity to be heard. Very well, I agreed. Sunday dinner at my house, 4 o'clock. Thank you, Mom. Jessica exhaled with relief. I'll let everyone know. We'll work this out, I promise. After hanging up, I called Olivia. The family is coming for dinner on Sunday. I'd like you to be there. Are you sure that's a good idea? She asked cautiously. Ethan was pretty clear about his feelings toward me. I'm sure, I replied. This isn't just about the farm anymore. It's about establishing how I expect to be treated going forward. I want you there, Olivia. I need at least one person at the table who sees me clearly. Sunday arrived with ominous gray clouds gathering on the horizon, matching my apprehension about the coming confrontation. I spent the morning preparing, not just the meal, a simple pot roast with vegetables from my garden, but mentally fortifying myself for what promised to be a difficult conversation. Olivia arrived early to help, quietly moving around my kitchen with the easy familiarity of someone who had spent time there. By 4 o'clock, the table was set, the roast was resting, and we were waiting. Jessica arrived first, her husband Thomas, in tow. She kissed my cheek with forced cheerfulness. It smells wonderful, Mom. Thank you, I replied, noting how her eyes darted nervously between Olivia and me. Amanda and her husband arrived next, followed closely by David, who had flown in from Seattle specifically for this meeting, a fact he mentioned repeatedly, as if his presence was an extraordinary sacrifice requiring acknowledgement. Ethan and Melissa were last, entering with tight smiles and stiff postures. Ethan pointedly ignored Olivia, while Melissa surveyed my home with the barely concealed disdain she always exhibited for anything she deemed insufficiently fashionable. Zoe had sent regrets via text message. Super important networking event tonight. Can't miss it. Fill me in later. Love you, Grams. The casual dismissal stung, but wasn't surprising. We gathered around the dining table in uncomfortable silence. I had deliberately seated Olivia directly across from Ethan, forcing a visual confrontation even if they wouldn't speak directly to each other. Before we begin eating, I said once everyone was seated, I want to be clear about the purpose of this gathering. I've made my decision regarding the farm. It's not up for debate or negotiation. I invited you here to explain my reasoning and to discuss how we move forward as a family. Mom, Amanda interrupted immediately. That's not fair. You can't just unilaterally change what Dad always intended. I held up a hand, stopping her. Your father and I discussed many things before he passed, Amanda. Not all of our conversations included you children. Now I've made my decision, and it's final. The farm transfers to Olivia. The rest of my estate will be distributed according to the terms of my updated will. Which are what exactly? Ethan asked, his tone attempting politeness while his eyes remained cold. That's between me and my lawyer, I replied. But I will say this. Going forward, my relationships with each of you will be based on mutual respect and genuine care, not financial expectation. Jessica leaned forward, ever the mediator. Mom, no one is saying we only care about money, but family assets have always been shared equally. That's the fair way, the way that prevents resentment and division. Fair? I repeated thoughtfully. Let's talk about fairness, shall we? Is it fair that Olivia drives an hour every week to check on me, while the rest of you visit only when you want something? Is it fair that she maintains the farm, keeps it in good repair, honors your father's legacy there, while Ethan sees it only as a commodity to be sold? Is it fair that when I was ill last winter, it was Olivia who brought me meals and medicine, while the rest of you were too busy to call more than once, if at all? A heavy silence fell over the table. David examined his water glass with sudden interest. Jessica flushed deeply. Amanda crossed her arms defensively. We all show love differently, Mom, Jessica finally offered. Not everyone expresses care the same way. That's true, I acknowledged. But at some point, love must be demonstrated, not just claimed. I'm not asking for grand gestures or constant attention. I'm asking for basic respect and consideration. So, this is a test? Ethan said flatly. Whoever jumps through Grandma's hoops gets the biggest piece of the pie? No, Ethan, I corrected firmly. This is a recognition of reality. A relationship is a two-way connection. For years I've given money, time, emotional support, childcare, while receiving very little in return. That imbalance ends now. And if we don't like your terms, Amanda challenged, if we think this is unfair and hurtful, then that's your choice, I said simply. I'm not demanding anything from any of you. I'm simply establishing that from now on, how you treat me will determine the nature of our relationship, including, yes, financial considerations after I'm gone. An uncomfortable silence descended. Thomas cleared his throat and reached for the potatoes, attempting to break the tension. These look delicious, Vivian. From your garden? Yes, I said, grateful for the momentary respite. The carrots, too. We ate in strained silence for several minutes before Jessica tried again. Mom, we all love you. If you felt neglected or taken for granted, we're sorry, truly. But dividing the family like this, creating a situation where we're essentially competing for your approval, that can't be what you want. I don't want competition, I clarified. I want authentic relationships. I want to be treated as a person worthy of respect, not a resource to be managed or exploited. No one is exploiting you, David protested, speaking up for the first time. That's a harsh accusation, Mom. Is it? I asked, setting down my fork. Ethan, when was the last time you called or visited without asking for money? Amanda, when did you last invite me to dinner just to enjoy my company, not to explain why Zoe needed another investment in one of her schemes? David, when did you last ask about my health, my interests, my life? No one answered. Olivia sat, quietly, her presence a steady support even as she remained largely outside the conversation. I don't say these things to hurt you, I continued more gently. I say them because they're true. And because at my age, I don't have time for comfortable fictions anymore. I want real connections with my family for whatever time I have left. But those connections must be based on mutual respect and care, not obligation or financial interest. Jessica's eyes filled with tears. Mom, I had no idea you felt this way. Why didn't you say something sooner? Would you have listened? I asked simply. Or would you have dismissed my concerns as the complaints of a difficult old woman? The truth of my words seemed to land with Jessica. She looked down at her plate, a tear slipping down her cheek. Surprisingly, it was Thomas who spoke next. Vivian's right, he said quietly. We've taken her for granted. I've watched it happen for years, said nothing because it wasn't my place. But she deserves better from her family. Jessica looked at her husband with surprise, then back at me. Mom, I'm sorry. Truly, we can do better. We will do better. I hope so, I said, because I would much rather have relationships with my children and grandchildren than estrangement. But the choice is yours. By the time dessert was served, Richard's favorite apple pie, a fragile truce had been established. No one was entirely happy, but a tentative understanding had been reached. The farm decision would stand. My will would remain as revised. And going forward, the family would make more effort to consider my needs and wishes. As they prepared to leave, Jessica hugged me tightly. We'll figure this out, Mom, as a family, I promise. I returned her embrace, wanting to believe her, yet wary of promises too easily made in moments of emotional resolution. Olivia stayed behind to help with the dishes. As we worked side by side in the kitchen, she finally asked the question I could see had been bothering her all evening. Do you think anything will really change, Grandma? I handed her a plate to dry, considering. Perhaps for a while at least. Old patterns are hard to break, though. We'll see. I just hope they understand what you're really asking for, she said carefully, placing the dried plate in the cabinet. It's not about visits or phone calls or who does what chores. It's about seeing you, really seeing you. I smiled at my granddaughter, touched once again by her insight. Exactly, dear. Exactly. In the weeks following our family dinner, a kind of cautious peace settled over us. True to their word, at least, initially, my children and grandchildren made visible efforts to change their behavior. The transformation was so dramatic it might have been comical had it not been tinged with such obvious calculation. Jessica called every other day, her voice carefully modulated to convey cheerful interest. Just checking in, Mom. How are you? Feeling today? Did you watch that documentary I mentioned? I've been thinking about your garden. Have the first frost hit yet? Amanda began inviting me to lunch every Thursday at the country club where she and her husband were members. She'd introduce me to her friends with exaggerated affection, her arm linked through mine as if we'd always been the closest of companions. Mom is just the wisest person I know, she'd gush to anyone who would listen. I don't make a single important decision without her input. Even David, before returning to Seattle, spent an entire afternoon helping me organize the garage, a task he approached with such grim determination it was clear he viewed it as an obligation to be endured rather than a pleasant way to spend time together. The grandchildren, too, made their appearances. Ethan and Melissa arrived one Sunday with an expensive orchid and invitations to dinner at their club. Zoe began calling weekly, her conversations a strange mixture of forced interest in my activities and subtle reminders of her financial struggles. Rent is due next week, and this startup is taking longer than expected to turn a profit. But don't worry about me, Grandma. How's your arthritis? Are you taking your medications regularly? Only Olivia remained unchanged, her visits and calls continuing with the same genuine warmth and lack of pretense that had always characterized our relationship. We never spoke about the other's sudden attentiveness, but occasionally she would catch my eye during a particularly performative display of concern, a silent acknowledgement passing between us. It was Zoe who first slipped, 6 weeks after the family dinner. She and her mother were visiting for Sunday lunch, something that had become a new tradition in their campaign of attentiveness. Zoe had been checking her phone repeatedly throughout the meal, her smile growing more strained with each glance. "We should probably get going soon," she finally said as I was serving coffee. "I have that thing at 4. "What thing?" Amanda asked, confusion evident on her face. Zoe gave her mother a pointed look. "The thing at the investors' meeting, remember?" "Oh, right," Amanda nodded, catching on. "Sorry, Mom. We've got this commitment. Can't miss it." I smiled placidly. "Of course, dear. Don't let me keep you." "We'd cancel if we could," Zoe assured me, already gathering her designer handbag. "But it's been planned for ages." "Actually," I said, "before you go, I'd love your help bringing down a few boxes from the attic. I've been meaning to go through some of Richard's old military memorabilia, and it's getting harder for me to manage the pull-down ladder." The brief flash of annoyance that crossed Zoe's face was quickly masked, but not quickly enough. "Oh, well, we're already running late, and these heels aren't really suitable for climbing around in attics." She glanced at her mother, clearly expecting her to extricate them. "I can do it, Mom," Amanda offered, though her enthusiasm seemed forced. "Which boxes do you need?" "The ones labeled Richard Service. There should be 2 or 3 of them." Amanda nodded, heading for the attic stairs with visible reluctance. Left alone with Zoe, I decided to address the elephant in the room. "You know, dear, you don't have to visit if you'd rather not." Zoe blinked, clearly surprised by my directness. "What?" "No, I love visiting you, Grandma." "Do you?" I asked mildly. "Or is this part of the new family campaign to demonstrate how much everyone suddenly cares about Grandma's well-being?" Zoe's carefully maintained facade cracked slightly. "I don't know what you mean." "I think you do," I said kindly. "And while I appreciate the effort, I'd prefer honest neglect to disingenuous attention. At least the former has the virtue of being authentic." Zoe flushed, opening her mouth to respond just as Amanda returned, dust smudging her expensive blouse, 3 cardboard boxes stacked in her arms. "Here they are, Mom," she said, setting them down with poorly concealed relief. "Is there anything else you need before we go?" "No, that's all," I assured her. "Thank you for your help." After they left, Zoe practically pulling Amanda through the door, I sat alone in my living room, surrounded by boxes of Richard's military service memorabilia. I hadn't actually intended to go through them today. They'd merely been a test. A way of seeing how genuine this new attentiveness really was. The answer was clear. Beneath the veneer of caring, the old patterns remained. The visits, the calls, the offers of help, all were performances, calculated investments toward an expected return. Olivia arrived an hour later for our regular Sunday afternoon checkers game, finding me still sitting among the unopened boxes. "What's all this?" she asked, gesturing to Richard's things. "A little experiment," I replied, explaining what had happened with Amanda and Zoe. Olivia shook her head. "Does it surprise you?" "No," I admitted, "but it disappoints me all the same." As October turned to November, the facade of family harmony began to show more cracks. The daily calls became every few days, then once a week. The lunch invitations grew less frequent. Zoe, frustrated by my continued refusal to fund her latest venture, an app for pet owners to find play dates for their animals, stopped calling altogether. It was Amanda who finally broached the subject during one of our increasingly rare lunch dates. "Mom," she began, stirring her iced tea with uncharacteristic hesitation, "I need to ask you something, and I hope you'll be honest with me." "I'm always honest with you, Amanda," I replied. "Whether you appreciate that honesty is another matter." She ignored my gentle barb. "Has anyone been making progress with the will situation? I mean—" And there it was, the question that had clearly, been simmering beneath all the forced attention and manufactured concern. Progress, I repeated, though I understood perfectly what she meant. You know, she continued, lowering her voice, though there was no one seated near us. Has anyone moved up in the rankings? Is Olivia still the primary beneficiary? I set down my fork, studying my daughter's face, the face that had once been so open, so full of genuine emotion. When had calculation replaced connection in her eyes? Amanda, I said carefully, if your concern is where you stand in my will, then you've entirely missed the point of everything I've been trying to say. That's not fair, she protested. We've all been making an effort, calling more, visiting more. Isn't that what you wanted? What I wanted, I corrected her, was to be valued as a person, not a checkbook. To be seen as your mother, not a resource to be managed until my death. The fact that you're asking this question tells me you still don't understand. Amanda's expression hardened. So it has all been a test. You've been keeping score while we jump through hoops, never knowing if we're doing enough to satisfy you. No one is keeping score, I said, though in fact Martin, as executor, was indeed documenting family interactions as I'd requested. But yes, I am paying attention to who treats me with genuine care versus who is simply performing caring to secure an inheritance. And how are we supposed to prove our caring is genuine? She demanded, making air quotes around the word. What's the magical formula that makes you believe we actually love you? Her words struck deep, the pain of them almost physical. There is no formula, Amanda. That's the point. Love isn't performative. It simply is. It shows itself in 1,000 small ways that can't be calculated or scheduled. This isn't fair, she repeated, her voice rising slightly. You've set up a system where Olivia can't lose and the rest of us can't win. Olivia isn't winning anything, I corrected. She's simply being herself, the same person she's always been. The fact that you see this as a competition rather than an opportunity for authentic connection is precisely the problem. Amanda stared at me for a long moment, then gathered her purse and stood. I need to go. I have an appointment. Of course, I said, not bothering to point out that she'd been the one to suggest lunch in the first place. Thank you for your time. As I watched my daughter walk away, her back rigid with indignation, I felt a deep sadness settle over me. This wasn't what I'd wanted. This strained, transactional relationship where every interaction was weighed for its potential benefit. But I couldn't return to the way things had been either, allowing myself to be used and taken for granted in the name of family harmony. That evening, I sat on my back porch watching the sunset paint the sky in shades of lavender and gold. The wee garden Richard and I had tended for decades spread before me, now put to bed for winter, the raised beds covered with straw, the last of the root vegetables harvested and stored. What would you do, Richard? I whispered to the empty chair beside me. His chair, still positioned exactly as it had been when he was alive. Am I being too harsh? Too unbending? No answer came, of course, but I could almost hear what he would say. Richard had never suffered fools or pretense. Be true to yourself, Annie, he'd often told me. At the end of the day, that's all any of us can do. The false harmony was crumbling, revealing the truth beneath, that for too many, in my family, I was valued primarily for what I could provide, not who I was. It was a painful realization, but perhaps a necessary one. I picked up my telephone and dialed Olivia's number. Grandma, she answered on the second ring. Everything okay? Yes, dear, I assured her. I was just wondering if you might come by tomorrow. There are some matters I'd like to discuss. December arrived with a dusting of snow and a flurry of activity. After the confrontation with Amanda at lunch, I'd made several important decisions. The first was to simplify my life in ways that made sense for me. With Olivia's help, I'd gone through the house room by room, deciding what to keep, what to give away, what to discard. Not because I was planning to move or because I feared I couldn't manage, but because unburdening myself of unnecessary possessions felt like a metaphor for the emotional unburdening I'd been doing. "What about this?" Olivia asked one afternoon, holding up a hideous ceramic owl that Amanda had given me years ago. I'd always disliked it, but kept it displayed out of obligation. "Goodwill," I said without hesitation. I'm done surrounding myself with things I don't love just to please others. Olivia grinned. Grandma's gone rogue. The second decision was to actively pursue interests I'd set aside after Richard died. I joined a twice-weekly watercolor class at the community center. Something I'd always wanted to try but had never found the time for. I volunteered at the local library, reading to children during story hour. I even accepted an invitation to join a group of seniors who took weekly hikes in the nature preserve. Gentle walks suitable for my ability level, but invigorating nonetheless. With each new activity, each new connection outside my family circle, I felt more like myself, not just mom or grandma, but Vivian, a woman with her own interests, opinions, and desires. The third decision was perhaps the most significant. After careful consideration and several discussions with Olivia, I decided to take a trip I'd long dreamed of, but had always postponed. Richard and I had planned to visit the national parks of the Southwest, Grand Canyon, Zion, Bryce. But his illness had intervened. After his death, I'd packed away those dreams along with his clothes, assuming my traveling days were behind me. I'm not getting any younger, I told Olivia as we researched options online. If I want to see these places, I should do it while I still can. I think it's a fantastic idea, she said. When are you thinking of going? April, when the weather is mild but before the summer crowds. And I'd like you to come with me, if you can take time away from the wildlife center. Olivia's surprise was evident. Me? Are you sure? Absolutely. I'd enjoy your company, and frankly, at my age, having someone along who can drive those mountain roads is just practical. She laughed. Well, when you put it that way, how can I refuse? We spent hours planning our route, researching accommodations that would be comfortable for me while still allowing us to be close to the natural wonders we wanted to explore. We decided on a 14-day journey, with time built in for rest, days and flexibility for my energy levels. I didn't announce these plans to the rest of the family. It wasn't a secret, exactly, but I no longer felt the need to seek their approval or manage their reactions. If they called or visited, they would learn about it naturally. If not, they'd find out when we were already gone. Christmas approached, bringing with it the usual expectations and family traditions. For years, I'd hosted Christmas Eve dinner at my home, cooking for days, decorating elaborately, buying and wrapping thoughtful gifts for everyone. It had been exhausting, but I'd done it willingly, believing it was what families did, what mothers and grandmothers provided. This year would be different. When Jessica called in early December to discuss holiday plans, assuming as always that I would host, I calmly declined. I've decided not to host Christmas Eve this year, I told her. There was a momentary silence on the other end of the line. Oh, are you not feeling well? I'm feeling fine, I assured her. I've simply decided I'd like to experience the holiday differently this year, without the stress of cooking for 18 people. But it's tradition, Jessica protested. Everyone expects. Yes, they expect me to exhaust myself creating a perfect holiday for everyone else's enjoyment. This year, I'm choosing not to do that. Another silence. So, what will you do instead? Olivia has invited me to spend Christmas Eve with her. We're going to attend the candlelight service at church, then have a simple supper. Nothing elaborate. I see, Jessica said, though her tone suggested she didn't see at all. Well, I suppose we could host at our house, though it won't be the same. That would be lovely, I said sincerely, and I'd be happy to attend if someone could pick me up, You know I don't drive at night anymore." "Of course," Jessica replied quickly. "Thomas or I will come get you." When Christmas Eve arrived, I waited by the window in my good wool dress, watching for Jessica's car. I'd wrapped modest gifts for everyone, books carefully chosen for each person's interests, and wore the cameo brooch that had been my mother's. At 5:15, minutes before we were supposed to arrive at Jessica's house, my phone rang. "Mom, I'm so sorry," Jessica began, her voice harried. "Thomas had an emergency at work, and I've got the ham in the oven and a million things to do. Could Olivia possibly pick you up on her way? I know she's coming here after your church service." I glanced at the clock. The candlelight service began at 6. "Olivia's already at church, helping set up. She was going to meet me there." "Oh." Jessica sounded genuinely distraught. "I'm really stuck here, Mom. Maybe Ethan could—" "It's all right," I said, making a quick decision. "I'll call a taxi. On Christmas Eve? That will cost a fortune." "I can afford it," I replied calmly. "I'll see you soon." But as I hung up, I knew what would happen. The taxi would take me to Jessica's house, where I would sit in the corner while everyone exchanged gifts and conversation, largely ignored until someone remembered I needed a ride home. Just like last year. And the year before. Instead, I called Olivia. "How would you feel about changing our plans?" I asked her. "Instead of me joining the family gathering after church, what if we kept Christmas Eve just for ourselves?" "I'd love that," she replied without hesitation. "But are you sure? Won't the others be disappointed?" "They'll survive," I said, surprising myself with how little guilt I felt. "I'm more interested in having a peaceful, meaningful holiday than in maintaining appearances." "In that case, I'll pick you up in 10 minutes. We can still make the service if we hurry." That Christmas Eve was one of the most beautiful I'd experienced in years. The candlelight service was moving in its simplicity. Carols sung by candlelight, the ancient story retold. Afterward, Olivia and I returned to my house, where we made hot chocolate and sandwiches. Nothing elaborate, but somehow perfect. We exchanged our gifts by the fireplace. I'd knitted her a scarf in the colors of sunset, and she'd framed a photograph she'd taken of Richard's favorite view from the farm. As we sat in companionable silence, watching the fires glow, my phone beeped with text messages, Jessica wondering where I was, Amanda expressing surprise at my absence, even Ethan asking if I was feeling well. I turned the phone face down without responding. Tomorrow would be soon enough for explanations. "No. Regrets?" Olivia asked, noticing the gesture. "None," I replied, and meant it. "I'm exactly where I want to be." In early January, I received an unexpected call from Martin, my lawyer. "Vivian," he began without preamble, "I've been approached by Jessica and Amanda about your will." I sighed, unsurprised. "What did they want?" "To contest the changes," he said bluntly. "They're arguing that you're being unduly influenced by Olivia, that the revised will doesn't reflect your true wishes." "I see," I said, a heaviness settling in my chest despite my lack of surprise. "And what did you tell them?" "That you're of perfectly sound mind, that the changes were made at your explicit direction, and that contesting the will would likely result in significant legal fees with little chance of success. I also reminded them that the will itself contains a no-contest clause, which means anyone who challenges it is automatically disinherited." "Thank you, Martin." "There's more," he continued. "They asked about the documentation I'm keeping. Regarding family interactions. Wanted to know how visits and calls are being scored and how they're currently ranking." I closed my eyes, the mercenary nature of their inquiry painful even after everything that had transpired. "As if it's a competition." "Exactly," Martin agreed. I told them I couldn't discuss the specifics, but assured them that the documentation is factual, not subjective. Dates, times, nature of interactions. And how did they respond? Not well, he admitted. Amanda suggested they might seek a conservatorship, claiming you're no longer capable of managing your affairs. The words struck me like a physical blow. A conservatorship. My own children seeking to take control of my life, my decisions, my autonomy. It was almost unthinkable. On what grounds? I asked, my voice steadier than I felt. They don't have any, Martin assured me. Your doctor confirms you're in excellent cognitive health. Your finances are impeccably managed. There's absolutely no basis for such a claim. And I told them as much, but they're considering it anyway. They're grasping at straws, I murmured. They're seeing the farm transfer as the beginning of a process that disinherits them in favor of Olivia. And they're panicking, Martin confirmed. After we hung up, I sat in Richard's chair on the porch, watching cardinals at the feeder I'd filled that morning. A conservatorship. My own children seeking to declare me incompetent simply because I'd finally stood up for myself, finally demanded the respect I deserved. The betrayal cut deep, deeper even than Ethan's tantrum or Amanda's accusations. This was a fundamental rejection of my personhood, my dignity, my right to make my own choices. That evening, I received a call from Jessica. Her voice was artificially bright, giving no indication of her behind-the-scenes legal inquiries. Mom, I've been thinking. It's been ages since we had a real family gathering. What if we did Easter at your house this year? Everyone together, like the old days. My initial instinct was to refuse. After learning of their conservatorship discussions, the last thing I wanted was to host a performance of family harmony. But something made me hesitate. I'm afraid I can't, I heard myself saying. I'll be away for Easter. Away? Jessica's surprise was evident. Where would you be going? Olivia and I are taking a trip. We'll be visiting the national parks, Grand Canyon, Zion, Bryce, a 2-week journey that Richard and I always plan to take. Silence on the other end of the line, then, you're going on a road trip, at your age, to the Grand Canyon? Yes to all 3 questions, I replied, a hint of amusement in my voice despite everything. But, Mom, those parks are huge. There's so much walking, and the altitude. And what if something happens? You're hours from proper medical care out there. I've consulted with my doctor, who's provided appropriate medications and precautions. Olivia and I have planned carefully. I won't be hiking rim to rim, Jessica, just enjoying the views and atmosphere at a pace that works for me. Another silence. Does this have something to do with the will? With punishing us for consulting? A lawyer? The accusation might have hurt if it hadn't been so predictable. This has to do with me living my life, Jessica. With doing something I've always wanted to do while I still can. Not everything is about you or the will. I didn't mean... Yes, you did, I interrupted gently. And that's part of the problem. You see every decision I make through the lens of how it affects you, not how it fulfills me. After we hung up, I finished packing a box of books I'd decided to donate to the library. Each one I placed in the box felt like shedding a small weight, not just the physical object, but the expectations and limitations I'd allowed others to place on me for too long. The weeks leading up to our April trip passed quickly. I continued. My watercolor classes, discovering a talent I hadn't known I possessed. I spent time in my garden, preparing it for spring planting that would happen while I was away. A neighbor had agreed to tend it. I had lunch with new friends from my hiking group, women my age who were living vibrant, independent lives that inspired me. My children's reactions to my travel plans ranged from Jessica's worried disapproval to Amanda's barely concealed annoyance. Easter was always at your house, she complained during one of her increasingly rare calls. The grandchildren will be so disappointed. I doubted that very much, given how little interest most of them had shown in spending time with me unless it involved financial benefit. David, surprisingly, was the most supportive. Good for you, Mom, he said when I told him about the trip. Dad would be proud of you for doing this. The night before our departure, I sat at my desk and opened my laptop. With fingers that felt surprisingly steady, I began to type a letter, not to my family, but to myself. A reminder of how far I'd come and why this journey mattered. Dear Vivian, I wrote, using my own name deliberately. Tomorrow you embark on an adventure that represents more than just a vacation. This trip is a declaration of your right to pursue joy, to explore, to live fully in whatever time remains to you. It is a statement that your worth is not measured by what you give to others, but by the richness of your own experiences and the integrity with which you live. You have spent decades putting others first, believing that self-sacrifice was the measure of a good mother and grandmother. But you have learned, painfully but necessarily, that true relationships must be built on mutual respect and genuine care. The people who love you, truly love you, will rejoice in your happiness, your independence, your adventures. They will not see your self-fulfillment as a threat or an inconvenience. As you stand at the edge of the Grand Canyon, remember that you are not just Richard's widow or Jessica's mother or Ethan's grandmother. You are Vivian. Complex, curious, brave Vivian. And this journey is yours. The journey itself was everything I'd hoped for and more. Despite Jessica's dire predictions about exhaustion and altitude, I found I managed the travel surprisingly well. Olivia's thoughtful arrangements, hotels with elevators, a rented SUV with comfortable seats, carefully timed rest breaks during our drives, made the experience far less taxing than I'd feared. And then we were there, standing at the south rim of the Grand Canyon. As the morning sun illuminated layer upon layer of ancient rock, the Colorado River a ribbon of silver in the depths below. The majesty of it took my breath away, this testament to time and the forces of nature that made human concerns seem so small by comparison. Is it everything you imagined? Olivia asked as we stood at the railing, the wind gently lifting our hair. It's more, I replied honestly. Richard would have loved this. The days that followed took on a rhythm both adventurous and gentle. Mornings exploring viewpoints accessible to someone of my mobility. Afternoons resting or taking scenic drives. Evenings savoring local cuisine and watching spectacular sunsets paint the landscape in colors no artist could fully capture. In Zion, I found myself approached by a park ranger leading a group of schoolchildren on a nature walk. Noticing my watercolor sketchbook, she asked if I would mind showing the children my work. Before I knew it, I was surrounded by curious 8-year-olds, explaining how I mixed colors to capture the unique red of the canyon walls. How old were you when you started painting? One little girl asked. 79, I replied with a smile, enjoying their surprised expressions. It's never too late to learn something new. That became something of a motto for our journey. In Bryce Canyon, we discovered a stargazing program led by an astronomer who had to be at least 85. Watching him nimbly adjust telescopes, while enthusiastically explaining the life cycles of stars, I felt a kinship with his refusal to be limited by age. I gave my first star talk in 1965, he told me when I complimented his presentation. I'll keep doing it until I join them up there. He pointed skyward with a grin. Throughout our journey, I found myself taking dozens of photographs, not just of the spectacular scenery but of small, meaningful moments. A desert wildflower pushing through rock. An elderly couple holding hands as they admired a view. A young ranger patiently explaining geology to visitors, her face animated with passion for her subject. Each image captured not just a scene, but a feeling, a reminder that life continues to offer beauty and discovery at every stage. Our return from the national parks coincided with the first bloom of spring in my garden. The timing seemed symbolic somehow, as if the world were welcoming me back with an affirmation of renewal. I arranged my watercolor sketches from the trip. In a simple album, a visual diary of our journey and all it had come to represent. The trip had changed me, not just in the obvious ways that travel broadens one's perspective, but in deeper, more essential aspects. I moved differently now, with more confidence, more purpose. The hesitation that had characterized so many of my actions in recent years had fallen away, replaced by a quiet certainty about who I was and what mattered to me. Olivia noticed it immediately. "You seem different, Grandma," she observed during her first visit after our return. "More yourself somehow." "I am more myself," I agreed. "Perhaps more myself than I've been in decades." My newfound clarity extended to my relationships as well. When Jessica called tentatively suggesting a family dinner to welcome you home and hear about your trip, I agreed without hesitation. Not from any expectation that fundamental relationships would change, but from the secure knowledge that I could engage with my family on my own terms, without fear or need for approval. The gathering was stilted at first, with carefully polite inquiries about our travels. I answered candidly, sharing stories of the breathtaking landscapes, the interesting people we'd met, the moments of awe that had moved me to tears. I showed photographs of Olivia and me at the Grand Canyon, of the astronomer in Bryce, of the stunning rock formations in Zion. What I didn't share was the deeper significance of the journey, how it had represented not just a trip I'd long wanted to take, but a reclamation of my own life and agency. Those revelations felt too personal, too precious to offer up to family members who had demonstrated they might not honor them. As the evening progressed, I noticed subtle shifts in the family dynamics. Ethan was quieter than usual, his customary confidence dimmed by the tangible evidence that I was living my life without regard to his expectations or approval. Amanda seemed genuinely interested in my watercolors, perhaps recognizing something familiar in my dedication to developing a new skill. Jessica watched me with a puzzled expression, as if seeing a version of her mother she didn't quite recognize. Only Olivia seemed completely at ease, occasionally adding her own observations about our adventures, but mostly allowing me to take center stage, a role I realized I had rarely claimed in family gatherings. After they departed, I sat alone in Richard's chair on the porch, watching fireflies begin to appear in the gathering dusk. The evening had confirmed what I'd already sensed. The family's perception of me had shifted, perhaps irrevocably. I was no longer the predictable, accommodating grandmother whose primary value lay in what she could provide. I had become something less convenient, but more authentic, a woman with her own desires, boundaries, and capacity for unexpected actions. Whether they would ultimately adjust to this new reality remained to be seen, but I found, somewhat to my surprise, that their adjustment was no longer my primary concern. The next afternoon, I received a letter from Martin. Inside was a sealed envelope with a note. "Per your instructions, to be delivered upon your return from your trip." With a start, I recognized Richard's handwriting on the envelope. A message. From my husband, held in trust by our lawyer until this moment. With trembling fingers, I opened it. "My dearest Vivian, if you're reading this, 2 things have happened. I've left this world ahead of you, and you've finally taken that trip to the national parks we planned for so long. Good for you, my love. I always knew you would find your way there eventually, with or without me. There's something I never told you, something I asked Martin to keep in confidence until the right moment. I've always known our children better than you have, seen the calculations behind their affection, the expectations beneath their concern. I loved them deeply, but I harbored no illusions about who they were or what motivated them. I set aside a separate fund for you, money they don't know about, that isn't part of our visible estate. Enough for you to live as you choose, to travel more if that's what you desire, to be free from any financial dependence that might give them leverage over your choices. Use it well, Annie. Live fully. Remember that I loved you not for what you gave to others, but for who you are, stubborn and kind, practical and dreaming, always more capable than you believed yourself to be. All my love, always, Richard." The letter blurred through my tears. Not tears of sadness, but of profound recognition. Richard had seen clearly what I had only gradually come to understand. That true love empowers rather than constrains. That it recognizes the beloved's full selfhood rather than defining them by their utility or service. As I folded the letter, carefully, and placed it in my jewelry box alongside my mother's cameo, I felt a sense of peace settle over me. The journey to the national parks hadn't been just a crossing of physical distance, but a transition from one way of being to another, from a life constrained by others' expectations to one defined by my own choices and values. What I wrote in my will had indeed made my family regret their calculations and manipulations, but the true transformation had been my own. I had reclaimed not just my property or financial autonomy, but something far more precious, my right to be seen, to be respected, to be valued for exactly who I am. And that, I realized, was the richest inheritance of all. Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out. And don't forget to subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss any upload from us.